everybody. This is So Many Sequels. I'm Josh.
I'm Garrett.
I'm David.
And the people who watch the video version of this probably have seen Nikki in the background sometimes. And of course, if you know David, you Nikki too. So
I mention her a lot.
Have her on the show this week because we're talking about Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Very exciting. There's a third one coming out. So we thought, you know what? We'll go back and talk about the first two. And I was told, David told us that Nikki really wanted to talk about these movies. So I'm very excited for this conversation.
See, I had to bring in the real guns on this because I'm not a big Harry Potter fan. Josh, as you know, Garrett, as you may know. So I had to bring in Nikki. She's a Ravenwood, and she knows exactly what's going on, who these people are, and who is important and who's not.
And it gets even cringier than that because we were talking this morning. We were talking about the ending to Crimes of Grindelwald and talking about, well, what's Grievous's big deal? And David was like, Grievous is going to turn out to be Voldemort's dad. And I was like,
oh my gosh. Are you a Ravenclaw though, or did he make that up?
No, I'm a Ravenclaw. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that's three of us are Ravenclaws. Have you ever taken the real test?
I have, but in truth, this movie, we're going to get into what I really am because this movie.
He's the American version. He doesn't want anything to do with the British version. He wants to go to the American school. He doesn't want
better than that. Ilvermorny sounds like a cool place. I'm a Thunderbird or whatever there, but I'll tell you, this movie had my true representation. Okay. People ask, what's your house? I'm a muggle, all right? I'm a nomad. I'm a regular person. I don't want any part in this. So it's nice to see some true representation for me in the role of Dan Fogarty in this movie.
Well, then I'll say for the sake of, I think, fairness, why don't we start with David as the non-Harry Potter person? Give us your thoughts on Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them.
It gets right into it. So I have read the first two Harry Potter books. I have seen, how many movies did they make? 7?
8.
They made 8. I saw 6 of 8. I've absorbed, but I was a Lemony Snicket kid. I was a Chronicles of Narnia kid. So I wasn't that into Harry Potter. And then it became so much more than either of those other two books, really. Well, you can make an argument Chronicles of Narnia is really popular, but Harry Potter is as over the last few years. So coming into it, I was really like, I'm not invested. So like it was going to take a little bit to kind of get me there. I think so. The movie starts with Newt Scamander, who per my understanding is referenced a lot in the books, but has never been seen before. And he is a magical zoologist, and he is coming to America for vague reasons that are part of the plot, but not really like overall that important, because it all becomes a big comedy of errors when his briefcase full of creatures gets mixed up with the true hero of the movie, Dan Fogler, who plays Jacob Kowalski, a just normal guy, a nomad. And honestly, I love their dynamic of the movie. Newt and Jacob are good buddies. They work. When he's kind of being introduced to this world, honestly, it was the best way to go about it. I think you needed a regular person to be sort of shown this stuff, which in the original movies, Harry was that figure, the kind of person who didn't know anything being brought into the world. But I think it was more interesting for me here because they're all adults, they're all grown-ups. This isn't a little kid's Harry Potter starting out. These are all like adults. They're out of school. The school aspect of it is gone. You don't have to worry about Harry Potter getting pants by Malfoy or any of that stuff. These are grown-up people with grown-up problems this man can't afford alone, okay? So it is like real people problems, and I really liked it.
Okay, so you really liked it.
Yeah, well,
that surprised me.
I don't feel like I expected that response after.
I didn't either.
There was nothing negative about that analogy. I just didn't expect that.
That's what I liked was Newt and Jacob. Most of the stuff with Creedence Clearwater Revival and
that's what I think of every time too.
And the second Salamanders, like I was kind of overall disinterested in that whole storyline. I liked Colin Farrell because he seems like an intimidating bad guy, but even that had its own twists and machinations within it. So that stuff I was kind of disinterested. I was kind of more interested in Newt, Jacob, and the Beast. This movie did not really tell me where to find some of these creatures, and that was my whole hope. going into it.
In Newt's bag.
Yes, that's where you can find all the.
That's where you find them. Okay, well, you liked it. All right. Well, then let's go to the other side and let's hear Nikki's.
As someone who actually did read the Harry Potter books, he's right that the idea of Newt Scamander is referenced throughout the books, not as much as he kind of implied, but we always are aware that this Newt guy existed and that he found all of these magical creatures. And I don't know about Garrett and Josh, but as reading the books growing up, I did always kind of think, I bet those adventures would be really cool to hear. Rowling's got something in her head. She has to, because of how detailed she just was with that whole world. Something had to be there. So I was very excited when they announced that the movie was going to be made, because I was very excited to get to dive into this history that we've always heard a lot about. When we get more detailed and talk about casting things, I have comments I want to make about different members of the cast. We'll get there. But I don't really have anything different from what David said. I really liked getting to dive into this history that we had heard about for a very long time and had always been vaguely aware of. And maybe some of you who are more into the lore than others knew a little bit more about it than the rest of us. But I did think it was really cool to finally get to see a lot of that brought to screen. I actually hadn't watched the first one. We saw the first one in theaters, and then I hadn't watched it again until yesterday when we sat down to refresh our memories for this. And I had just as much fun watching it last night as I did when I saw it in theaters. I think it's a fun movie. We'll get more into thoughts on the sequel later, but I sort of feel like this first one is a little more polished than Crimes of Grindelwald. It's a little bit neater, and we can get into that later, but I did enjoy that. I will give my one comment. I talked to David about this morning, and he didn't agree with me. We'll see how you guys feel. I'm a little insulted. I was very excited to get into the American wizard world, because we're told that wizards exist in France, and we're told that they exist in, is it Hungary or Romania? I can't remember which. We're told that they're there. Obviously, they're in the UK. We're not ever told in the Harry Potter books that it exists in America. There's not even like a throwaway line about it. The lore kind of hinted at the idea that it existed, but we never really saw it. So it was really cool to get to see that. But I personally, I don't know about you guys, I am a little offended that the American word for muggle is just simply no match. Because listen, I get that to the rest of the world, America looks pretty dumb. Like, I understand that. And in a lot of ways, we've deserved that reputation. But it just makes it feel like we're even stupider. Well, you don't got no magic, so that's what I'm gonna call you. You're a no magic because you got no magic.
But I got the retort. I'd rather be a no mage than a muggle. Muggle sounds like a slur. It really does. It sounds like some mean British guy. You got your offensive accent. Some guy was like, "Oh, you're a muggle. Is what you are, you dumb muggle." Yeah, it's just dumb. Muggle sounds ugly compared to no mage. I'd rather be a no mage.
Well, and like we pointed out when we talked a little bit more about it, the French called them the non magique, which is pretty close to no mage. And in Germany, it is the can't spells, which I kind of think is interesting. I kind of like that one the most. So maybe no mage is kind of closer to that, but it's still it's so like obvious of a name that it made me feel like, okay, I get it. Americans are stupid. We know. I don't know. It just felt
We're
really
not clever enough to come up with a word like muggle.
Exactly. That's my thing. But yeah, I really liked the movie too.
Okay. All right.
What did you guys think?
I never thought about the no match thing. I get it. I don't know where I fall yet. I'll have to simmer on it for a little bit. But yeah, it does seem sillier. Garrett, you go next.
Yeah, no, this is a theater movie. I was very disinterested watching it. It was the first time I'd watched it since the theaters too, and I was really into it. I walked away like, Mr. Newt Scamander, oh my God, let's know more about him. Jacob is the greatest thing in the world. I'm so excited. And this time I just was like, I think that it suffers from, and so I'm somewhere in between David and Nikki as far as like Harry Potter fandom, where I never really read the books, but I was super into the movies until the fifth one, and then I just wasn't. And then I got into them as an adult again. So then I read all the books and got back into the movies. So I'm somewhere in between, but it suffers from a general fandom of, you have to make me care about these characters, and I care about them the first time I see them, but then I don't remember them afterwards like that. They're not in my memory already. Like this is my first initiation into them. And so with Harry Potter, I had books that were already there for most of my life. And now I'm just being introduced to him for the first time in this franchise. And I just don't think that they've done enough for it to stick with me. It was a really fun movie when I saw it, but I never revisited it again. And I think that is going to be a problem with that they have in the long term with this, is I just don't think people care enough to really care. I think they're very interested, but I don't think that people are going to be overly excited, despite the fact that it is in the Harry Potter fandom. I just don't think it has that ability. It will. I'm not saying it won't. I guess this is going to be a huge movie maker, this new one that comes out, and it's going to make a ton of money and all of that. But for me, I just don't care enough right now. And I need this franchise to pick up some momentum.
Isn't what it's saying.
Well, and in support of what you're saying, there's 4 years between when 2 and 3 came out, which I mean is not the studio. We've kind of dealt with a major moral crisis here. But in support of what you said, I think you bring up a good point in that there's a pretty good amount of time. There wasn't a lot of time between 1 and 2, but there kind of is with 2 and 3. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is true. And unfortunately, again, for not the studio's fault, there's been some unfortunate controversy attached to this franchise in the last few years between J.K. Rowling, Johnny Depp's whole situation, which we'll get into the Johnny Depp of it all later. But yeah, I think that there's definitely a possibility that some people may have either lost interest or just lost steam. That can happen. I will say that for me, I think I'm a bit closer to Garrett's take there about the whole it being a theater movie. It does have it is better on a big screen. There's a lot of great magic and a lot of great special effects. And it didn't quite suck me in as much on the TV, because I also don't think I've watched it. I don't think I've watched it at home either until this instance. I think I last saw it in the theater. And I enjoyed it, but it did not suck me in as much as the first time. So it lost a little luster. But overall, I do think that this first one is pretty good. I like Newt and Jacob a lot. David, you talked about that. They do have a really good dynamic. A lot of the side characters are tougher sells for me, and I think that's I think some of that's casting, which, Nikki, you brought up that you had some comments on as well. I don't love Ezra Miller. I don't love that we lose Colin Farrell. I wanted to say this first without immediately bashing Johnny Depp. I'm not a huge fan, but I think the main thing is I'm sad that we lose Farrell and not necessarily that we gain Johnny Depp. But that's a huge twist at the end that I remember, even when I did see it in the theater and loved it, the movie, that I had like the air sucked out of me because I was like, Johnny Depp! No!
No, I agree. Well, I agree to an extent. I didn't like the Johnny Depp reveal after the first one, strictly because I didn't think Colin Farrell was doing anything wrong.
No, he was really pretty good, I thought.
Yes, and especially with the reveal that it's supposed to be Grindelwald, I get the direction that they ended up going with it, and we can talk about that later. But he does sort of bring this like charismatic, I can get you to listen to me sort of vibe to it to get you to do my malicious things. And I guess Johnny sort of has that, but in a very different sense. I don't know. I ended up not hating Johnny in Crimes of Grindelwald, which we can talk about later. But that was my thing with Colin Farrell was, where did he get anything wrong? I thought he was great.
Yeah, as casting forward a little bit here, we know that in the third movie, it's going to be a different actor again. And again, this is not necessarily something they were going for. But if this was to continue past the third movie, I say just recast it again.
Yeah, you know what?
The opening sequence of Secrets of Dumbledore, when we get there, should be the back of Johnny Depp's head. Maybe not actually Johnny Depp, but just looks like, right? Reforming into Mads Mikkelsen. And just nobody knows what this guy really looks like. And that can just be his thing, is no one really, except for maybe Dumbledore, nobody really knows what this guy has looked like for the past however many years. And so in Fantastic Beasts Part 4, you drag in Benedict Cumberbatch, or you drag in who's another like British legend.
No, what you do is in the last one, you have the big reveal of the final actual Grindelwald, and it is Robert Downey Jr. and it ties into Sherlock, and then they run off and solve crimes into British. It's a perfect segue.
I made the same joke, kind of, but opposite. I said it should be Martin Freeman, and it will be two Watsons against each other. So I was like,
you can't go wrong.
Go with that. We can't go wrong. Just keep recasting it. Make that a part of his character as opposed to it being like this. Well, we had to keep recasting the role thing.
Honestly, at this point in time, I think that would be a good creative take on it because they have. You're right. Colin Farrell he did so good in that one, and us kind of already knowing that he's Grindelwald in some way, shape, or form as the movie unfolds is fun for us. And then you just reveal him to everyone else, and you can slick back his hair and dye it blonde, and it can still be Colin Farrell, and you don't lose anything or gain anything. And you don't have to deal with all of this, the stuff that arose afterwards. So you don't set yourself up for stuff like that. But at this point in time, I think it would be fun to just mask him every time. I think that would be a really fun way to keep that franchise fun too. Because I think that they're going to struggle because, again, for me, Jacob is the best character. Overall, Jacob is the best character, and I think that is a problem. I care more about him than Newt or anyone else who I can't name because I don't care enough about
Well, I'll tell you, yeah, I mean, to this franchise, this specific wing of it, right? The Fantastic Beasts part of this Wizarding World franchise, which they have that title as though they've got more than two franchises at this point. They don't yet. Maybe they will someday. There's a little bit of when this movie first starts, and I remember feeling it in the theater, a little bit of desperation because Warner Brothers knows that they made Harry Potter and they kind of did the definitive version of it already. There were complaints that some parts of the books weren't right, but for the most part, most Harry Potter fans like the movies, or the movies fit exactly what it should have looked like. A lot of the feel of it, the magic looked good. For the most part. Now, everybody has their complaints, but it's going to be if they were to a year from now say, hey, we're going to start making Harry Potter movies again. We're going to start over with the first one. Fans would go, why? We've got 8 movies that you spent, what was it, 15 years making, and they're all perfectly good. There's no reason to start over and do them over again. I don't want to watch Harry Potter grow up a second time.
But I think we're going to.
So, like, there's a little bit of, they need something. They have the rights to this J.K. Rowling verse, and they need something. They really need this to kind of work a little bit.
I'm all about an expansion of a world like Harry Potter. There are so many different things that can be done, and I have no issues with expanding it into a movie verse, into a TV verse. Give me more content, whatever. I'll take it, and I will consume it more than likely. But I think what they're going to run into again is because of us as fans, we have Harry Potter to look back at. We know what to expect. So we don't know what to expect here. We don't know what's in the mind coming from this. Like, we don't have anywhere to go. So we're just assuming what we want it to be, or what we think it's going to be. And for me, I agree with David, where I wanted to see something more with these Fantastic Beasts. And what I'm getting is a more Newt is becoming Harry Potter. And I don't want that for Newt. I don't want Newt as Harry Potter. I want more from Newt. And
That's
I'm
definitely
more just of overarching, very similar to Harry Potter-esque story of Dumbledore and a bad guy and someone caught in the middle trying to solve the problem. And I wanted something different.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily know what it was, and I can't assume
I know
what's about to become because there's 5 of these. So there's clearly an idea, and I just don't know what it is.
I'll tell you what you and I wanted was Jungle Cruise. But we want sort of the adventure without any of the weight, because there's this element of this franchise, which is there's a war coming and there's this big bad guy that, like, really, like, it's like, it kind of stinks that, like, Newt could be this kind of fun, whimsical character on these wild adventures that don't have to have this world ending weight hanging over his head. And I feel like that's where, for me, I lost some interest in the movie. Like, I liked the movie, like I said at the beginning. But that aspect of it, of this, like, evil criminal that, like, Newt has to, like, kind of deal with is, I don't know, it's just so much, like, heavier than I really want, I think, from the movie. I'd a little bit more of Newt exploring strange locations and finding the crazy animals.
Yeah, but
in the jungle.
In the safari, the big elephant has escaped or whatever. I don't remember what the animal is, and they're having to corral it, and this animal is in the city. Give me the modern day Jurassic World, but Newt Scamander. Like, he is out there in this world trying to collect this information and write this book. I think that's what I was kind of expecting. This Newt Scamander in this world. We're with him learning about these animals, very Jurassic Park-esque instead of Harry Potter-esque. It was just a different element. And
I think in some ways, though, we do get that in this movie.
In this
If
one we
we
do.
contain
This
the
one, yeah.
conversation to this movie, then that is
We're
the-
expanding. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I do agree that it does seem like they're building this franchise to be bigger than Newt, to where it feels almost like he's not the focus anymore. It does seem like we're building towards it's kind of like Dumbledore's the protagonist down the line, is where I feel like we're going, versus Grindelwald. And for Harry Potter fans who are like deep in the lore, we kind of know where that's going because there is enough story built in to where we're familiar that they had a big
Well,
thing.
and on that note, I do appreciate that we're getting to see that played out.
So agreed, yeah.
We know that Dumbledore had a crazy life, and kind of the true story of growing up. The more we learn about him, the more disappointed we are. Like, oh, okay, it turns out he's kind of not a savior. He made some bad choices in his life,
Right.
and he is, and I have all sorts of
Wizard.
stuff that I can say about Dumbledore later. But I do appreciate that we are getting to see that played out, because we know that there is a lot of story there. I just don't know that, in support of what Garrett's saying, I don't know that Fantastic Beasts is the place to tell that story.
Yeah.
I think that story could have been told on its own.
We're a great place for that. I'm sorry, Lenny, do you know where a great place for that story to be told is? An HBO Max series.
Yes.
Similar to, give me this story with an overarching Dumbledore from his rise and fall of, give me that violent, like Harry Potter fans are mostly adults now. So give me that more violent, brutal side in an HBO story, and I will eat it up.
But
And I
also,
want this magical, fantastical world for Newt.
I was going to say, imagine another television show where it's Newt and it's kind of like Dr. Whovian and he's just traveling around different places finding magical animals. That could work too.
It's very funny that you bring that up, because on the whole casting thing, if we can just kind of get into that for a second, very early when it was announced this was going to be a thing, very early in the production days, there were rumors, nothing like legitimate, nothing confirmed, at least that I know of. To my knowledge, this was just kind of like a fan casting that kind of got put out there. But there were rumors that Matt Smith was in talks to play Newt Scamander. Listen, I understand that. David, do you hear that?
Yeah, I hear it.
Yeah, he's up. I understand that Matt Smith as Newt Scamander would just be the 11th Doctor in Fantastic Beasts. I understand that, but that doesn't mean I don't want it.
You know, I can see he is kind of Eddie Redmayne-y, so I could see that.
Well, and
But
especially
I am
last
glad
night,
he did do that.
with the giant rhinoceros in the zoo thing, or hip, whatever it was, that
Kind
fantastical
of a combo of those things.
that fantastical beast, if I may, when that was happening, and he was kind of like doing the weird motions, like to try to like get it to copy him and emulate him. As that was happening, I thought to myself, that's 11. Like, it's just 11. It just is. And I get that's all it would have been, but man, I would have loved it.
Yeah, well, he's in that group of British actors who didn't get to do Harry Potter the first time. Every British actor, except for 9, were in those movies. Martin Freeman was in an interview one time, and he talked about him, and it was like, he says like me, and he lists a bunch of other guys, that Simon Pegg, and a bunch of guys. They were just like they were like in a Dickensian novel with their nose against the glass, just watching from the outside as all the other actors got to play Harry Potter, and just watching and hoping that one day they'll get the call.
Bringing it back to this movie, I want to talk about Jacob Kowalski again. For me, was just the standout character that really brought this movie home. I think that this movie really came together for me in the end. The ending I felt was strong emotionally because of how attached I felt to Jacob. And I think that I think that's where this movie hits a home run, is it brings us as the Muggles or the No-Mages into this world of, we have known for years this magic existed, and what would it be like to be a part of it? And so we are experiencing this Newt Scamander story from his perspective after so many years of wanting that perspective, being brought into this, what would it be like if I got to be brought into this world? And so for him to experience all of this stuff and be accepted and then have to give it up at the end it really hit me home. I think that is where this movie really shines, is the adaptation of him, or the adoption of him into this world, and us being able to experience it through his eyes.
And that should have been the story, is this nomad being brought into this world that he had no idea existed, and these animals that he had no idea existed, and getting to just completely wrap himself in that world with this one wizard who kind of takes him under his wing. Like, that should have been the story. To support what you were saying earlier, I think that should have been the story.
Yeah, I think that would have been a good angle for sure.
And then you could build towards whatever Newt Scamander adventure needs to go to, whatever, help an animal. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's her job, not mine.
Yeah. This is something that we're always teasing ahead. We'll talk about more next week in Crimes of Grindelwald. But it almost makes you wonder why, because of Jacob kind of working as the vessel for the viewer, why they needed to obliviate him at the end the way that they did. I just didn't feel like it was necessary to need to do that, I guess. Kind of bummed me out.
I guess they really wanted, it seems like they kind of wanted to establish that the story had stakes in a way, but it was also like, well, maybe did they not know if they wanted to have Jacob back in the next one?
Yeah.
Well, you could tell by the end, or by the kind of the denouement, if you will, to be fancy. We have Jacob clearly remembers elements of what he went through, because all of his pastries are inspired by the crazy beasts that he encounters, which is a fun idea. And they explain it in the second one. They kind of touch on why he remembers things. And it's one of those ones that if you'll accept it if you do. If you don't like it, you're just going to be like, nope, dumb. Hey, I know, buddy. It was an emotional part, though, when he had to step out into that rain and he was like, nah, I got to do this. Like,
you know how at the end of Avengers Age of Ultron, Thor is like going off to try to find the stones. And then at the start of Ragnarok, so I was going to go find the stones. That didn't really work out. Like, it kind of feels like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
He decided to take this in a different direction.
Yeah.
But also, one last wrap up on the casting thing. There's a ton of people snuck into this movie. Ron Perlman, John Voight, Zoe Kravitz is like a blinking you missed it little thing. Looking through the cast list here, trying to find somebody else. That's it. Jimmy Chan's snuck in here in this movie, like a 2-line role. So there's that. Yeah. I think this wasn't necessarily the worst way this isn't the worst start to a franchise that we've done. It's pretty good.
Well, we are at the part of the show where David would give us a box office rundown if he is capable.
Yeah. Now, if Mom would come get this kid, I'll trade her while I do this part.
Sure.
So come and grab him, and I'll read him.
Look at that teamwork.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
So,
Aaron 101, work together, friends.
Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them opened November 18th, way back in 2016. Just feels like yesterday, doesn't it? 2016 was its own era.
It was.
And it opened to actually a pretty decent $74.4 million, which is a good open for a new thing. In the number 2 spot that weekend was Doctor Strange in its 3rd week. It was a very magical weekend because you had Fantastic Beasts, Where to Find Them, Doctor Strange. In the number 3 spot, you had Trolls, which has a lot of magic and stuff going on.
Yeah.
Brought in 17.4 in its 3rd week. At number 4, you had Denis Villeneuve's Arrival.
Denis Villeneuve. Yeah.
Villeneuve, yes. His movie Arrival came in at number 4.
That's a great movie.
12.1. And then at number 5, Almost Christmas. We need to add that to our Christmas list.
Yeah.
Future Christmas movies. Almost Christmas brought in 7.2. And then just as a name drop, he also had Hacksaw Ridge at number 6, which I never saw, but it got a lot of attention. Nikki usually watches movies based on what guy she's crushing on at a time. So Andrew Garfield's been a recent interest. So anyway, Fantastic Beasts would go on to make $234 million in the United States. It would do even better overseas, where it brought in $580 million, giving a worldwide total of 814. So on a new franchise, PG-13, it's actually pretty good. It would be the number Let's see here. Very hard to do with a baby in your hands. Just try to scroll. It finished as the number 12 movie in the United States for the year of 2016. Number 1 movie. I'd ask you guys to guess, but I don't think you'd get it. It is Rogue One, a Star Wars story.
Nice.
Number 2, you have Finding Dory. Number 3, Captain America: Civil War. Number 4, Secret Life of Pets. And number 5, The Jungle Book. So then, Fantastic Beasts would finish just above Doctor Strange, beating out his rival Wizard, who would take the number 13 spot that year. And I was looking at this. Well, I don't really read this number off very much, but given how the box office did last year, I kind of want to point out that 2016 was an up year for the box office. It was brought in 11 million total for all 11 billion for all movies, which was up from the previous year by about 2%. So that's the end of the box office stats. I'll kick it over to Josh for the letterbox game.
Okay. We're going to play some letterbox game here. We're going to guess the score of this movie. I'm going to read some of the community's favorite reviews before we do that guess. And I think this first one, which is the most popular review on Letterboxd, might, I don't know, relate to kind of how we have the general vibe of this episode, I think. It is a 3-star review. And it says, I was going to complain, but then I remembered something my dad once said when the Hobbit movies came out. Quote, the movies might not be great, but any time spent back in Middle-earth is time well spent. And having spent my entire childhood obsessed with Harry Potter, I have to apply that logic here to the Wizarding World universe as well. And yeah, the movies aren't great, but like, I'm happy to be back in the Wizarding World, I think is the best way I can describe it. Some other popular reviews. Colin Farrell morphing into Johnny Depp is tied with Jared Leto's Joker for number 1 spot on my list of the ugliest shit 2016 cinema forced me to see with my own eyes.
Yeah.
That is true.
That took a lot of thought.
They're not wrong.
Scanning for, okay, let me go to some negative for funsies. These are always the really unhinged ones. Half star. If I could give it a 0, I would. Oh, some of these contain words I won't say.
Oh.
Half a star. Dog shit. Half a star. One of the worst things I've ever watched, which seems to be a common theme among these negative reviews.
Lame. If you're going to give me a negative review, at least make me laugh.
I know. They weren't overly funny except for that joke.
Come on, negative.
Okay, well, those are some reviews. Who's brave enough to pick?
A 3.2.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in that same range. I'm going to guess it has like a 3.1.
Okay.
.6 guess from Nikki.
6. Okay. What was yours again, David?
Mine was 3.1.
Okay.
I'm going to try to hit the nail on the head. Did you see it, Josh, already?
I did.
Oh.
So I won't guess. But we do have a winner, of course. Oh, I've already forgotten, but I think we have one right on the nail. 3.2.
Oh, so Garrett.
Yes, Garrett got it right on the nail. 3.2 stars based on 300,000 plus reviews. So
Swish.
that is a pretty average, high-end average, I think, for Letterboxd.
Yeah, I think this is a 3-star movie from me. I watched it originally, and I do think that the theater effect is real for this one because I was hyped and excited and gave it a 4 stars, but a full star drop. 3.
Okay. David, what's your guess?
Yeah, no, I remember enjoying it fairly well in the theater, despite my lack of interest in Harry Potter, the franchise as a whole. And I enjoyed it for the most part this time. So I'm actually going to go up a little higher. I'm going to give it a 3.5 just because if I asked to watch it again, I wouldn't have a problem. It's not like, ugh.
Okay. I'm going to give it a 3 to match Garrett. What does Nikki give it?
What do you give it?
Perfect.
Capricious.
I think that makes us pretty close to the Letterboxd average. So that's it for this episode. Find us online at somanysequels.com. We'll be back next week with Fantastic Beasts 2. Very exciting.